I just got finished watching Obsession, Radical Islam's War Against the West. And I found out about this film through Amazon's Hot DVD. It's one of the top purchased DVDs on Amazon right now. And I think that has a lot to do with the president of Iran, Mahmoud, coming to speak at Columbia University, and it has a lot to do with Iran being a hot-button topic in politics. And something interesting that I saw was Nader gave this speech, and he said that the reason why Bush and Cheney aren't being impeached is because they have threatened Congress with martial law. They state that if, they were to face impeachment hearings, that they would immediately launch a war on Iran, declare court-martial, delay the war into the war. It is going to be a war, but the election in 2008. And so there's all these things firing off on the internet and in the mainstream media about Iran. So I think that's kind of what is causing a lot of people to buy this movie. It's definitely what caused me to buy this movie. The thing about the Obsession and the trailer for Obsession is that it features a lot of Fox News' recommendations for the movie, and I don't necessarily trust Fox News, but I don't necessarily trust anybody in regards to spinning a very one-sided message, including the liberals. And so I just try to not assume, check everything out, and then come to my own conclusion. And my conclusion on Obsession is that it's mostly a propaganda piece. Now, with that being said, there is 4 to 5% of it that is good, that creates a distinction between, average Muslims and radical people for the spread of Islam. And there is a distinction, and I'm glad that they at least acknowledged it and didn't, just forego that. But the footage that they show of radical Islamic believers, followers, is all of this very anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-West, pro-jihadic movement stuff. And it's interesting, I learned a few things. I learned that jihad means my struggle, which is the same as Mein Kampf. There are a lot of parallels between Nazi Germany, Hitler, and radical Islam, including footage from, I believe, the late 20s, of Hitler meeting with the leader of the radical Islamic movement back in the day. But there was only narrative over the footage. There wasn't any dialogue. There wasn't any transcript of what they were talking about. It was all just, well, Hitler met with this Islamic guy to, spread anti-Semitic fervor in the Middle East. But I don't believe that is necessarily true. What did strike me as kind of interesting that, the movie you can't really dispute is Hitler was pretty much a guy that was for pure Aryanism, and there is really no right or reason for him to be meeting with this radical Islamic guy because of his beliefs. It's a direct contradiction. So I am interested in finding out what they were talking about. But what I wanted to do with this video wasn't to talk badly about Obsession. Obsession had some good parts too. I do think that it definitely taught me a thing or two about the nature of radical Islam and the nature of how propagandists do feel, and I legitimately feel that this filmmaker is being honest with their message. But it's interesting because there's this other film called Farwell Israel, Bush, Iran, and the Revolt of Islam, that it kind of speaks something different. What do you mean by the revolt of Islam? And then the director says, there is no such thing as radical Islam, whereas this Obsession says radical Islam's war against the West. What do you mean by the revolt of Islam for this movie, Farewell Israel? There is no such thing as radical Islam. Islamism is not a war against the West. It is an internal struggle for the revival of Islamic society, a revolt against their failed secular governments. The attacks of September 11th are completely misunderstood by the West. In fact, September 11th was only a provocation by a small group of Islamists, hoping to use the West's response to inspire the masses in Islam's internal struggle. The September 11th attacks were successful only because George Bush played into the hands of al-Qaeda, first by invading Afghanistan and Iraq, then by adopting al-Qaeda's agenda for government reform across the Middle East, helping to pave the way for Islamist parties to come to power. There's another question. Why are Israel and the West lacking understanding of the Islamic worldview? The director says, unfortunately, it is a natural tendency to dismiss ideas and values that are not understood or shared. Thus, one judges another society through one's own worldview. Because the West considers its own historical development of concepts of nationalism, freedom, and secularism as the natural advancement of humanity, it has a hard time accepting that its values don't apply to others. This is why Western media doesn't even know what questions to ask. For instance, why can't Islam accept Jewish statehood? Why don't Western concepts of secularism and nationalism fit into Islamic society? Why do Muslims consider America to be the great Satan? You'll find the answers to these questions in our film. This documentary is also for the war in Iran. They both share similar aesthetic qualities, which is like down with America, that radical Islam says down with America, and that, Iran is a threat. Mahmoud is all over this website. He is only featured one time in Obsession. But what I am making this video for ultimately is I believe that we need to come together and speak publicly to each other, Christians, Jews, Muslims. We need to come out of the closets. We need to come out of hiding who we are and what we stand for. And because the only thing that the mainstream media is covering is the sensationalism. And that this movie is a sensationalist movie. I'm sure Farwell Israel is probably a sensationalist film that scares us, because fear is a great tactic. And what I think of terrorism in this movie and here is the same thing that I felt in the communist Red Scare during the Cold War. It was something that was meant to create like a hysteria in the people, and so that the people's motives were to stay safe by any means necessary, because they were legitimately frightened. And after September 11th, people were legitimately frightened. That's why we had this great unity, people bound together for the first time since the bombing of Pearl Harbor, because people were legitimately frightened that something badly was going to happen to us, because for the first time ever we were seeing Americans die. We have to move past that fear, and we need to open up to each other. So I am calling on mostly Muslims to come out and speak to us about your beliefs, about how you feel about radical Islam, about how you feel about the West, about how you feel about American imperialism, about how you feel about the project for the new American century, about how you feel about God and the Word of God and the Quran and its parallels and its what it has in common with the Bible and what it has in conflict with the Bible. Because if we don't start talking about this stuff, then nothing's going to get accomplished. We're never going to reach the peace that we have this shared interest in. So I would like to apologize to you for not having an understanding of where you come from. I would like to apologize for you on behalf of the American people who have mislabeled you and have misinformed each other about your nature, about your struggle. The thing about jihad that doesn't make any sense to me is that it means my struggle. Why do you proclaim that your struggle is something worth fighting to hold on to? Why do you wish to hold on to your struggle? Why did Nazis wish to hold their struggle at such a great pride? It's like pride fuel. It's like my struggle is important to me, so I must maintain this struggle. I must keep working to retain the struggle. Help me understand. This is a plea for help to understand why the struggle is something that is held in high regard. Or is jihad something that actually radical Islamists wish to do away with because they don't want to struggle anymore? It seems like jihad comes from the struggle, but then it is the struggle, so it's promoting itself in this really warped way. Help me understand, help us understand, and maybe we can show our leaders that they're really unnecessary in this compromise, in this compromising of our own values to reach an understanding with each other so that we don't have to see our loved ones die. And I know, I totally understand that it's easier said than done, and it's easy for a person with white skin to be making this video because I don't have very many worries, because I am doing okay financially, and there's nothing I can do about that but try to open myself up to you. So it's an invitation to take my hand and try to forge and teach me something, and I can try to teach you something. If you feel you can learn anything from me, let me know. Ask me questions. I have a lot of questions for you. Come and find me. This invitation is open to Jews, to Christians, to Islamists, to Muslims, to Hindus, to Buddhists, to Baha'is, to Quakers, to everybody in the world. Let's start an open dialogue, because I really do feel like it's necessary at this point in time, because I feel like we're getting to a turning point, and turning that point is definitely easier than going past the point of no return and being stuck in a shitty situation. So, peace, love, namaste, all of those things, and assalamu alaikum, my brother, my sisters.